Ciao a tutti, benvenuti. Grazie per essere
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Good morning to all of you who are in the Americas. Good afternoon to Europe and Africa, and good evening to Asia and Oceania. This is an initiative of Care to Imagine, one of the 5 ways to experience integral ecology in the Dare to Care project, people, the planet, and our ecological conversion, included in the United World Project's pathways. My name is Ana Helena Pinto. I'm from Portugal. I'm a nutritionist and founder of Nutrition for Happiness. We want to try to connect with our inner self, with others and with nature, but also with the transcendent that underlies everything, but above all, to experience it together. We are an international, intergenerational, and interdisciplinary group that wishes to perceive and experience together our shared belonging to nature, nature that becomes a space in which to encounter oneself, others, and the transcendent. But we also want to spread and support integral ecology as a shared interreligious, ecumenical, and spiritual commitment. That's why we thought we'd start with today's webinar. 2 specialists in the field of interiority, our inner life, will help us to take the first steps in this process of reflection and connection, and they'll do it from different perspectives in order to share with all of us some tools that help us to relate to ourselves and discover how much this relationship is a natural source of hope.
Ringraziamo tutti quello che ci seguono su Zoom, ma anche in live su YouTube, e anche tutti quello che ci sentiranno successivamente.
So, we thank all of those following us on Zoom, but also on YouTube, and those who will watch the recording later. Thanks to Susi and Narcisio for your availability and being with us. Susi Roman is Hungarian. She graduated in general medicine in 1993. She's worked in the field of public hygiene since She's worked in the public hygiene since 1997. She specialized in preventive medicine and public hygiene in 2003. She works for the promotion of health through various methods and programs, also coordinating some centers for screening, tests, and epidemiological analysis at the Institute of Public Hygiene in Budapest. She's a PhD student at the Seville University Institute, researching in the fields of philosophical anthropology, health, and the environmental question. Narciso Sunda is Italian. He graduated in law in 2001, then did electronic engineering, military service, and various work experiences. He prepared for the competition for work in the judiciary and legal practice for the qualification in forensics in 2002. He began his studies to become a Jesuit. In 2006, he completed a baccalaureate in philosophy and was subsequently sent to the House of Spiritual Exercises in the University Center in Bologna as a formator and guide in processes of discernment. In 2011, he did further studies in theology in Spain, and in 2014 in biblical theology in Rome. In August 2018, the last stage of his formation in the Society of Jesus took place in Sri Lanka and India. Today, he's parish priest of the Parish of the Miracles of the Holy Cross in Catania, Italy. We're going to talk with them about connecting with our inner self, rediscovering the relationship with our inner self, aspects and tools regarding knowledge of human nature. Before starting, we invite all those who want to make comments or ask questions to do so in the chat or comments window. Later, we'll open this conversation to everyone and ask the speakers the questions we received from this global online event. So let's start with Suzuki. As a doctor, can you tell us something about what contributes to an individual's health and whether medicine considers that a person's complete well-being is affected by the various components of human nature, such as body, mind, and spirit? Is a person's complete well-being also related to his or her personal abilities?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. In this short session, I would like to offer you an insight into human nature from the point of view of health and disease. The perception of the physical state of our body affects us closely, and the quality of our health can strongly determine shorter or longer periods in our life. And also, with the recent pandemic, we have become more sensitive to health issues. When we get sick, and then when we get better, we experience the biological limits of our body, and we experience getting to know ourselves better.
Grazie. Ancora il prossimo, perché adesso ci perdiamo.
So that's the question of health. Now let's stop for a moment and let's play a game. You can express yourself. What do you think when you hear this word health? I would ask you to pick up your mobile phone, open your browser, and key in menti.com, and after that, the code you see now. And everyone can write 3 words. Let's see the results.
Allora, 3 parole. Cosa pensate sulla salute?
So 3 words. What comes to your mind when you hear the word health?
Chiediamo di condividere quel slide su Mentimeter. Ecco. Forse ancora vengono le parole. O potete ancora continuare, magari alla fine vedremo ancora. Sì, ecco. Adesso sta cominciando. Bellissimo, grazie. Grazie per la partecipazione.
Thank you for participating. We could see life, harmony, well-being, relationship, happiness, balance, serenity. Then we will see later also what comes more. But the well-being, benessere, well-being is coming more. Thank you. Usually, when we talk about health or disease, we think about concrete or measurable things, such as the level of blood pressure, how much calories we eat, or the level of immunoglobulin. When we talk about health, taking into account the premise of seeing every human being as body and soul, then the subject of health acquires greater depth and extends to our well-being. We can say that on the basis of the unity of bodiliness and our inner self, we exist as a person. This statement, however, does not deny the importance of quantitative tests in the various treatment processes. Let us now briefly see the development of the concept of health and the vision of the human person that it allows us to glimpse. We will talk in a general way, but we must say that health is always concrete because it is about someone's health. When we get sick, our first thought, our first concern is whether there is a cure for our disease and whether we can have access to it. For the pandemic, we asked ourselves, when will the vaccine be ready? Thanks to the development of biomedical sciences, for example, the use of antibiotics or vaccine, modern medicine has brought enormous gains to humanity. Even today, new methods are emerging at the service of promoting health and new types of treatments. We can ask, will we be able to cure any disease by developing medical and genetic technology? Above all, in the first part of the 20th century, health was understood in a strictly biological sense and as the ideal functioning of the human organism and organs, of everything that is easily measurable and quantifiable. While we must rightly recognize the value of this approach, one can simply refute the omnipotence of a purely biological vision. It's enough to think of two sick people who have the same state of a certain disease and who, with the same treatment, do not heal in the same way. This understanding of health, which is found in certain circles to this day, reveals a biological and materialistic view of man and woman, and develops the methods of treatment typically between pharmaceutical or surgical interventions. In this way, we look at our body from the outside as a little separated from us. After the Second World War, it was seen, and even today, it can be experienced, that poverty poses great obstacles to the healthy development of people due to the quality and quantity of food, the circumstances of their homes, and many others. Also, for the development of the social sciences, the World Health Organization in 1946 introduced a new formulation of health. So what is health? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and does not consist only in the absence of disease or infirmity. This definition became historic because it goes beyond the strictly biological view and tends to a holistic formulation by summarizing all the factors other than biological and physical, which have an impact on health. It is not difficult to discover that behind this concept, there is a more complete vision of the human being that takes into consideration, apart from the physical reality, also the mental, social, and relational dimension of the person. If I were to ask you if you agree with this concept, I'm sure someone would say, but it is impossible to reach a perfect state of health. Among other things, my health changes from one stage of life to another, from childhood to adulthood. In fact, although this formulation is a point of reference in the medical and scientific fields, various criticisms emerged against it that paved the way for new developments. The Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion, written by World Health Organization in 1986, presents an even more complete view of health, in which the person is an integral part of the social and natural environment and develops their health together and in the community with others. Also, there is a broad range of social factors which determine health. The document speaks about the potentials of health and personal skills and changes the perspective because health is not an ideal point of arrival, but a starting point, a capacity and a potential to be developed that makes possible the fullest improvement of human beings with both individual and collective efforts. For example, let's think about how we learn a sport. It takes our commitment, a coach, or at least someone who teaches us, others who help us. It takes time and place in which to practice the movements. It is a long process until we acquire the personal ability for a certain type of sport. In defining health promotion, the document gives a dynamic vision. We talk of the process and the ability to identify and fulfill one's aspirations, to satisfy one's needs, to change the surrounding environment, or to adapt to it. This document, bringing a new definition of health, also brings news from the anthropological point of view. It includes the human being on the one hand in his or her social and environmental context, and on the other hand in a dynamic and continuous development of various skills thanks to personal and community guidance. Further research on health formulation focus on adaptation and dynamic balance and underline the ability to adapt and self-manage when faced with social, physical, and emotional challenges. Here we could stop and ask ourselves 3 questions. I'll stop for a moment after each question so we can try to give a first personal answer. Am I respecting my ability to adapt? For example, in the face of life. Do I do too much or do I do little? Do I know how to choose among the many possible things to do? We have come to the idea that health is a process of life fulfillment and a continuous development of skills. But precisely because there are so many definitions of health, we must affirm that it is difficult to say what health is. Within the philosophy of medicine, Gadamer talks about the unknowability, the not knowing, and the hidden character of health. For this author, it is important to state that health is not felt, but experienced as a just and pleasant presence together with other human beings in the world. He emphasizes that health is a continuous evolution, a dynamic equilibrium that is always renewed. Health consists in understanding in understanding it as a state of balance, of equilibrium. Health concerns the whole person, and the hidden nature of health makes us understand that despite research in various fields, the human being remains a mystery. Each person is a mystery in his or her entirety. Thank you. I have finished my first part.
Grazie Susi.
Thank you, Susie. It's really interesting, this overview of health, starting from technical definitions to a more anthropological one, highlighting how a sound state of health is a result of harmony in relationships and the interconnection of all components present in human nature. And also then the concept of adapting and managing one's life. So, Marcisio, could you give us your reflection on what Susie was just saying? And then, arising from your experience in spiritual accompaniment in times of decision and discernment, could you help us understand how this inner life of ours can contribute to a complete well-being, and how in this we can rediscover ourselves and our identity? And could you give us the tools that let us enter into dialogue with our inner life and to be in a kind of listening relationship? Thank you, Anna and Susie, and for the exercise, because I answered it myself as well. Within me, I connected health and salvation. In Italian, the word health comes from the Latin salus, which means also salvation. At a certain point in my theological studies, there was the words of Tertullian in the 2nd century. He said, "Caro cardo salutis," that is, the flesh is the cornerstone of salvation, of the integral health of a person, we would say. And this struck me very much, because already Jesus of Nazareth and the people who followed him, there is a vision, a holistic vision of the person. Jesus was Jewish, so the division into body, soul, and spirit, which for us is a very useful teaching method and helps us manage our lives and see whether we're going towards personal, physical, spiritual, and mental health, or in the opposite direction. Whereas in Jesus of Nazareth, there isn't this division. He's a Jew where everything is integral, because the Jews have a more integral view of people. So we think wisdom is to do with knowing things, but in Judaism, wisdom is knowing how to do things well, how to live well. So there's a very big difference. So these theories had an impact on Ignatius of Loyola, my founder. When his health went haywire, he started experiencing, he felt joy and happiness, and his life plan became ever more concrete when he survived because he was hit by a cannonball that went through his legs, destroying one completely and seriously wounding the other. And because his health had forced him to stop and to take care of his body, he had to think about this happiness, a healthy body, a good knight, able to do wonderful things as a soldier. This was the aim of his life. This was the fulfillment of his life. So it blew into smithereens with this injury. And in his home in Loyola, he had an important experience looking within himself. He began to understand what did he really want from life? Did he want to be happy as a man? We understand that when he finally understood what made him happy as a man, he begins to get better. His health gets better. He wasn't yet called Ignatius, he was Inigo, which can be translated as fiery. While he was convalescing from all these injuries, trying to understand what to do later, he started reading two types of books. He didn't have a telephone or chat, so he wanted to get all this time go by. So he started picking up books. Some were about being a knight, a soldier, but then he had experience. When he read these chivalry books, he felt very happy, but then he was sad afterwards. The result, spiritual result, was he dreamt being a wonderful soldier and knight, but then he felt empty. And then his sister gave him books about St. Francis and St. Dominic, and he liked reading them, and he thought he wanted to do the same or even more. And he was very enthused by this, and he felt full of joy. So this, following these thoughts, helped Ignatius to get better, because it gave him something to look forward to, because it was connected with his desire for happiness and the fullness of life. So what did he do then? He started realizing that there are two fundamental sort of urges or pushes within us, two deep-seated emotions within his heart. One very complicated and the other one very relaxed. So what happens, starting from his reflection? He wasn't so much studying these books as realizing how fragile and weak he was. His body was weak, his inner self was weak, but he began to understand that a person should be made up in a new way. So I hope you can see the slide well. For Saint Ignatius, a human being is built in this way. On the one hand, we have a part, an identity part, and the other is a false identity. So on the identity side, he realized that his being healthy depended on the fact that he was a son, a child. So there's this part of this heart that's in harmony. He's a son who is loved, feeling loved by God, and this brings within him the desire to live out his identity in one of these rainbow of life, which each of us can convey just a little bit of goodness, care, friendship in this rainbow. And he wants a light to shine out from this desire to bring life. So he begins to realize his identity as a child of God and as a free person. But on the other hand, there's a whole series of fears, this counter name, which is a response to fear. So if I'm accused of something, I feel inadequate, unable, left aside, and so on. Whereas looking at this possibility of losing his life, what happened is that Ignatius realized that he's gone wrong. And so you either flee from this realization or you go for it. And so he's afraid, and rather than showing what he truly is, without accepting what he is, he becomes unhappy. But he says, no, if you feel this fear creeping in, you've got to do the opposite. So the human being is a person who has to follow this. So otherwise, the Greek culture puts ideas into your mind that you don't necessarily want. The line I drew is only to distinguish these two areas, the counter-name area and the name area. Integral health and well-being can be compromised by the counter-name. To regain this integral well-being, it's necessary in life to show and act, and not react and demonstrate indulging fears and senses of inadequacy that do not come from our identity, but from a false identity that we've acquired over time.
Thank you, Nurse. Thank you. This is the challenge, to discover our identity, who we are, and to take care of our inner life, because it too contributes to a state of integral health.
Salute integrale, no? Grazie.
Thank you. Susie, what do you think? What external factors influence the state of health and well-being? Doubts, anxiety, changes, situations that are out of our control. These are all factors that contribute to a state of stress that also affects health. What and how many are the resources, skills, and personal talents that can help us deal constructively with external factors that produce stress?
Grazie Anna, grazie Narciso.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Narciso. We have seen that health depends on the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of various daily challenges, and also in the face of much greater challenges, changes that happen in life. What are the resources and skills that make it possible and enable us to adapt by contributing to achieve personal health and balance? First of all, self-knowledge, and together with this, recognizing our limits. We learn this all the time in life. It is an arduous learning process and can even be painful. If we look on the positive side, we can say that respecting our limits means loving our body in the right way. Concretely, it is a challenge to find a manageable pace of life, respect the natural rhythms of our body, get enough sleep that is more or less 7 hours, leave time for recreation, eat at fixed times, engaging in movement or doing sport. We are not asked only once to accept our limits, but year after year, because over time, our body changes. And this means that every age will have its specific activity, study, work, starting a family, etc. For balanced health, it is important to understand that it is a dynamic balance of the whole person. And for this reason, it is important to open our eyes to what exists beyond the dimension of bodiliness in us and in others. Even our inner life has its own pace to respect and to follow. It helps if every now and then we stop and reflect on our balance, examining the points listed, the pace of one's life, taking into account the fundamental dimensions, that of bodiliness and that of our inner life. As we have heard before from Narciso, certain attitudes such as fear, our reactions, shutting things out, this increase our internal tension and unbalance. The balance we have already achieved. Therefore, they can become psychic stressors. What is stress? To maintain health, we try to adapt to the changing situations around us. And that is why health is a dynamic balance that we must continually reestablish. These unexpected situations or facts can come in various forms. These forms are stress factors, stressors, which can be environmental, organic, social, relational, and psychic. But they have a common impact mechanism, that of the stress response. Living beings react to threats by mobilizing their reserves and hormonal resources in a general emergency response, the so-called general adaptation syndrome, which includes all these non-specific adaptive reactions. Stress is a positive struggle, but its continued presence can lead to exhaustion and a host of psychosomatic illnesses. There is good stress and bad stress. Positive stress or eustress has a motivating effect towards achieving a goal by increasing energy and improving performance. Bad stress or distress causes long-term emotional and anxiety problems, thus reducing performance. The impact of stress always depends on how demanding it is for the body and the degree of adaptation it requires. The same stressor can cause eustress or distress in several people. After an immediate response to a stressful situation, if the presence of stress is continuous, it can lead to the development of a series of symptoms or diseases through biochemical processes, such as damage to the cardiovascular, digestive, neuroendocrine systems, musculoskeletal disorders. And beyond all this, persistent stress can also contribute to psychological and psychiatric symptoms, increasing the risk of developing mental illness. For example, panic disorder, generalized anxiety, depression, and so on. Already from these symptoms and diseases, we see the importance of managing problems adequately and adaptively. The theory of health genesis states that the two foundations of health are the general resistance, resources of the person, and the ability to find a sense of coherence. Resources can be internal, such as various biological or psychological capacities. Behaviors or characteristics of the person or external resources, such as available goods, services, and relationships. The sense of coherence indicates the adult person's motivation to act in the world and the ability to consider this act as effective as it is understandable and governable and manageable. Important factors to help improve the ability to draw from individual resources and to implement and develop a sense of coherence are communication and social skills, the ability to create and to participate in social support. All this requires a positive attitude towards oneself and towards the other. In relationships, the ability to be able to give and be able to receive help of any kind. The perceived quality of existing relationships through the resources activated, and the sense of coherence affects the whole person. So to develop our health, we should not only respect and learn about our limits, but it is good to develop all the skills that help manage stress. For example, a positive vision of one's own stressful situation as an opportunity for growth. It is an obstacle to overcome, as a stimulus to give more. Or recognize that I can contribute to caring for myself and others. That is self-confidence. Another one is the ability to be grateful for various things, for all our own talents and those of others. Or knowing how to ask for and accept help from experts or from someone more mature than us. Finding ways for recreation when there is too much stress. Go out into the countryside or a park in the sun. Take a trip. And focus on the present moment. And here too, we could continue hearing the experience of each one about when we have experienced a difficult situation as a stimulus that help us to grow. I finished, and so I pass now to Anna and Narcisio. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. The interconnection between the physical body and our emotional body, so to speak, is really interesting. But above all, the ways in which we perceive the totality of the person and of the individual components of human nature. Thanks so much. So, Narcisio, how can we act regarding external factors that produce stress? Should we review and change the direction and the aims of the choices we've made? Feeling and recognizing different emotions that are produced in our inner self is very important. And there are also some empirical criteria for discernment that can help us understand if we're going in a direction of life that leads us from what's good to what's best, or on the contrary, from bad towards worse. Can you help us find out what these criteria for discernment are? I'll try to do this, starting from what Susie said, this emphasis saying that a person's happiness has to do with coherence. I like this because it comes from the Latin coesus, which means to be united, cohesive, integrated, which is always a holistic vision of the person, an integrated vision of the person. So I'll share my screen and I want to project a slide. This should be shared now. Good.
Ok, mentre io inizio a introdurla, è un'altra slide che viene dalla
There's another slide that comes from Ignatian, the Ignatian approach. He says that the human person has three inner pushes. The first is what comes from myself. And what is this inner self? It's what my genetic inheritance gave me, physical, spiritual, existential, spiritual. And when I decide things in accordance with this without external interference, then I send my life in the right direction. But this part is constantly, the self is constantly challenged by two other spirits. The first is the good spirit, which is all the inner voices that help us to grow in humanity, to be authentically human. Whereas on the other side of us, so to speak, there's another push, influence, which comes from within us, which is the enemy of human nature, as Saint Ignatius says, that dehumanizes a person and makes you evil. For Ignatius, it's very clear that nobody is evil, but people become bad, which is comes from the word captivus, which is to fall into a trap. A voice speaks, makes us be afraid and traps us, and so we have to release ourselves from this wrongful voice. It's typical, and some also in cartoons that we saw as children, you see somebody trying to make a decision, trying to think what the decision is, and these voices, there's a little angel on one side saying do this, and the little devil on the other saying do that, the bad thing. So seeing this question, these thoughts that flow one after the other and influence our decisions, and that bring us to joy or happiness and relationships with others, the ability to ask for help and to fulfill ourselves as children of God who are loved. There's another set of voices that try to set all this aside. So Ignatius says, okay, what are we going to do about this? How can we understand what to follow, how to act? Ignatius has three verbs concerning discernment. Discernment comes from the Greek, diakrino. Krino means to judge, and diakrino means to go through judgment. So how can I judge a situation and decide what to do? The first verb is to feel, listen, to feel and listen what is happening, to stop and say, how am I in front of that decision, that choice? What does this choice make me feel? What do these two voices, the one that makes me human and the one that makes me less human, what are they saying to me? The second passage, to recognize the things that make you more human or more inhumane, that disintegrate me, that separate me from others, creation, God, myself, and then to grasp all those positive things and to push aside the things that make us less human. How can we understand whether I am following a positive track? He defines it. So if you say that something is taking you from good to better, then that's okay. If you're getting into a better level of humanity, so he calls it going from good to better. In this dynamic, the good spirit continues to give you energy. How do you perceive this in terms of peace, joy, hope, trust that grows in yourself, in God, in the others, in creation, love? You're better able to love, to let yourself be loved. And on the other hand, there are all those things that make you less human and sets you in the opposite direction, your heart in the opposite direction. You're worried, you're anguished, you have little hope, little trust, and a very weak capacity to love. You rush from one thing to another. So how to move? It's to know what to do. You have to get into a fulfilled dynamic of life. Of course, the right direction is given to us by feedback, empirical feedback. So I'll try and show you another slide in which we could see empirically whether in my life I'm in a dynamic that makes me more human or which dehumanizes me. So now let's go into the second slide. So let me know when you see it.
Ok, benissimo. Allora,
now, there are two fundamental movements, the one that humanizes, the one that dehumanizes. The first thing Ignatius says is stand firm on what generates your humanizing spirit. And how will you identify it? You'll have balance, clarity, from the point of view of your moral conscience, humility, trust in God, simplicity, openness, turning your actions, you're mature, free, self-giving, self-critical, patient in difficulties, and then you're effective, inner peace, calm, joy and freedom. So if you're experiencing those things, if you're on the right track, then you should have some of these. But if then a contrary push comes to you do, yes, if you get one of these, then you need to do the opposite of what it suggests, this dehumanizing spirit. So from an intellectual point of view, it creates this confusion, lies, self-aggrandizement, your moral conscience, you pretend, you're obstinate, pessimist, two-faced, closed, egocentric, vain. And regarding actions, there's irresponsibility, avidity, pride, rebellion or passiveness, ignorance, always wanting satisfaction and effectivity. So these things which are within Ignatian spirituality and the wisdom of Ignatius, which is one that, as we have said several times, isn't a theoretical one, but is practical. There are those movements that should help you to remain in a coherent flow of life, cohesive. So also what Susie was saying, you should be able to relate quite easily. You should be able to have an ability to overcome crises, to respect others. So then you say, how come this enemy of human nature comes along? How come I feel desolate from time to time? So the first motive, and this is where I'm going to stop now, is because we are lazy and negligent in Christian practice. Because we're Christians, if we go into depth in what we are and what we feel and following what we feel and what we are. The second reason is because we know what we are without having the help from external energy, the Holy Spirit for Christians, or life that breaks in if you don't have faith. But this life that comes in gives you a plus, gives you a boost to your natural talents, which are actually imperfect. So desolation and sadness can be overcome in this way. So I would stop here. I'll go back to, we'll hear some questions so that we can share amongst us.
E così invitiamo tutti coloro che
Thank you,
vogliono.
Narciso. So we would like to invite everyone. You can ask your questions. You can write on the chat.
Narciso, grazie. È proprio la
Thank
sfida,
you.
no,
This is the challenge of giving ourselves so that we can remain free with greater capacity, with better well-being, more sense of life, and healthier with this integral health, which is the capacity to adapt ourselves to life. Thank you. Let us see the questions. If there are some comments.
Qui abbiamo due commentari per cominciare. Primo di Anna Filippa Mello. Grazie, che interessante.
So thank you. It's interesting, starting from the fragility to arrive to full serenity. Everything is serious. It's a great help. Thank you. There's a first question. Do you have some specific indications for those who have chosen the way to grow, if they have chosen the spirituality of unity? Thank you for this question. So do you have any specific indication for those who have chosen the spirituality of unity?
Dire qualcosa.
I can say something. I have not deepened this specific theme, the spirituality of unity, but certainly we are linked. Our interior life is linked to our bodily dimensions. We can help the others,
ma se, per esempio, se diamo un buon esempio,
for example, we give a good example
realizzando nella nostra stessa vita
in our same life,
queste scelte giuste,
this choice that we make
rispettare i nostri limiti,
to respect our limits,
realmente varie situazioni,
that we face different circumstances. With this, we give an example to the others. So we can influence or we can contribute in our community. How your community goes ahead. And this rhythm of life regards not only our personal life, but it is also a rhythm of the whole community. It has an influence on the life of the whole, in the entire community.
Riflettere su, diciamo, che come va il ritmo di vita nelle nostre comunità.
So you will understand how the life of the community, the rhythm of the community goes ahead. Depends on
Instead,
your personal life.
I will dwell on the unity of the person. The first thing to say it in a unified way, on the other hand, is not to deceive oneself. What you feel and the voices that come from outside of us, we sometimes we don't want to listen to them because we're afraid of being thought ill or strange. We hear voices that say, tell us to do or say things that are absurd in absurd context. So we're afraid of listening to them. The second thing is don't follow them. The voices that say to do bad things, to harm nature or people or anything, is ignore them. Don't do it. Take them. You've heard them. You know what they say. Try to act in the opposite direction, doing the most humane thing possible, because a unified person perceives these voices, listens to them, does the opposite, doesn't accept them, but also hands them over. Yes, you gotta give them to God, or whoever's not a Christian, just let them go. That's what I'd like to say.
Un po' come prendersi cura di se stesso anche per
So to take care of ourselves, also to contribute to the life of the community. The personal health is important for the health of the whole community. Also, truthfully.
Also, because this becomes the promoter, the first mover in my life, your life, their life. We don't want to live life somewhere else. It's enable you to give life rather than to miss out on living it.
La
Do you have
prossima.
other questions? Volunteering in the hospital could be an element that helps us for the integral health of the person. For people who are there for long or short periods, helping the others is also a way to reach our whole being. Thank you. Absolutely, it is like that. There are various types of volunteering in the hospital and even spiritual. These are support that are very important. Absolutely, it is good to consider this, the volunteering. When we establish this relationship, it is us who earn, because a relationship is never unilateral. Something can always be learned from every situation, from every relationship that can bring us ahead. In this sense, it will always contribute to our well-being.
I'll tell you experience to answer this question. When I was in Bologna in university, we went to hospitals, and it was called Panim, meaning faces. I didn't go there with my dog collar, just went with these young people. We went into a ward just to stay with people, be with people, and to help people to come out of one of the most difficult things in life, which is suffering. But the worst thing of all is suffering on their own. And we spent time with them just chatting, talking about their life, our life, sharing with them. Also because they were religious people, Christian people, so maybe we prayed together as well. But they knew that we were thinking of them, remembering them, sending them messages, keeping in touch. And together with this, which I think is taking care, there's always the temptation to do service in order to gain for yourself. This is a dynamic. I did it out of love. I don't go to help others to receive love from a poor, suffering person. We need to be very careful about that, but that would give us desolation and we would recognize the mistake easily.
Maria Ramirez.
Next question. I like very much this exchange. In what way can we find this personal balance when we live with persons who try to evade this, when they escape from this situation?
I would say, do it yourself. You do it first. You start, Maria, because then you become freer. If you put a free person in a context, there are two different dynamics. Either that person frees everyone or that somebody tries to throw you out. The only way is a life testimony, the testimonial life. My freedom enables me to be with others, and somebody will have the courage to say, why do you this? How come you do this? And this will enable you to give them an answer. I do it because I take care of my inner life. It helps me to be a woman who is free within me and outgoing rather than fearful and hidden. So then you go ahead. You don't need to talk a lot. Words don't achieve anything. It's your life and your witness.
Grazie, Narciso. Testimonianza vitale, un'espressione troppo interessante, grazie.
It is very important that witnessing.
Aggiungerei da qua di
I would like to add also something. I would add, perhaps to look for those persons with whom we find the possibility to build something, to go deeper in the relationship, to start with these people, with these persons.
Così costruendo insieme.
So building together, you might be able to bring out something greater. So the next question, what exercise do you advise when we find in difficulties to remain in the present moment, to live the present moment?
Allora, la prima cosa è che io
The first thing I advise is to deactivate your running away either because you're in a traumatic situation. I'm a poor person in this situation. You're running away from the past, or otherwise everything is absolutely fine. You've done all the best you can, and there's nothing left. So send away the thoughts of the past and send away the worries about the future. I'm not in the present because I'm worried about the future. I'm preoccupied about things that I can't control. I can't even add a second to my life, so why worry? So sending away worries about the future and memories about the past, you come into the present, and the best way to live it well, is gratitude. Thank you for life, for the health that I've got now, for what is around you. Starting from this gratitude, you focus once again on your present, which might be complicated, difficult, painful, but you're in the present and you're free and you can face I can face my life being in the present. Otherwise, you get lost in the future or the past.
Grazie, assolutamente.
Thank you. Absolutely.
D'accordo.
I agree with what you have said. I would add something simple. You can also start from the spiritual side, but then if you are not able to start from the spiritual part, at times you are so agitated, you are so worried about something, you can simply go out, recollect yourself in another way, something that you like. Take a walk, take coffee, look at a beautiful picture frame. When you do something relaxing and you go out of that stressing situation, this can also help you. We are made like this. At times, things take up so much, the worries take us so much. So there are different ways how to get out of this. We should get to know ourselves also from this point of view. You ask yourself, what can I do? Certainly, you have already had several experiences. So one time I did well in this part. Let me remember, what could I do again now? So we need to put in order our the things of the day, the things of the week, so as not to do so much, but I tell this also to myself. Don't fill up a day so much. Thank you. From Marcela de Rios, thank you for everything. It's interesting and useful. A question for Narciso. In the distinction, good and bad spirit, is it possible to have mixed attitudes? For example, at times you are docile and abstinent. At times you are obstinate.
It's possible, but not normal. This alternating in this movement, as it were, consolation, desolation, is a little bit like your heartbeat. We'll always be in this good spirit when we are in heaven with this constant growth. But on earth, we are in this alternating, but it's very useful because it helps us more and more to understand how to be in the attitude of consolation. I'll explain. When I'm in an attitude of desolation and I become obstinate, so be careful about three things. So the reason why you're becoming obstinate is a result, but it comes from a process of actions. So you've ended up obstinate. The process of thought, the thought process that led you to become obstinate, where did it start? You find yourself off track. The process that took you to this obstinacy, where did it begin? But it's actually something different. So you need to see where the gap was. There's a principle, the means to get there, and the goal. They have to be all good. If one of these three things, the principle, the means, and the goal, isn't good, then you're not on the right track. So then you become obstinate, sad. So which of these three moments you fell? And so you correct yourself in that reality.
Marina Barbosa. Con la pandemia, molti giovani e adulti hanno perso
With the pandemic, many young people and adults have lost their jobs and their future prospects. What do you think can we do, especially at this time of post-pandemic? Thank you.
Comincio io.
I can start.
Guarda, io direi che
I would say
può essere che magari anche può essere che non hai perso il lavoro, però
perhaps you did not lose your job, but the quality of your work does not satisfy you anymore. There are some things that we feel that does not go well. So I could say like this. Also from personal experience, perhaps you can try to look for that personal relationship with those with whom we have already established a good relationship at work. You see how we are. We are all in the same situation. We feel that we are not okay and we do not know how to start again. If we try to change again, find that relationships that you used to have before.
This question brought to mind a cartoon where the Pope goes to Moses and says we're in a time of crisis in our life. This has been, so there'll be many, sorry, I didn't follow that very well. So there are two powerful elements. We're in a time of crisis. The word crisis itself says that certainly there is a complex situation, but there's also a set of opportunities that opened up before us. What's the difference? Are we doing well or badly? 3 years ago, now we can share so many things right across the world, as we're doing now, that we didn't do 3 years ago. All these beautiful things. So we are in a moment of crisis. It's a difficult time, but we have to have a way of seeing things to say that here's a new opening. When we analyze text, two texts that are the same, biblical texts, where is your attention then in the two biblical texts that you're comparing? You see the difference. What's the difference between now and before? That difference for you and each of us must discover what it is that for me, what is opening up for me here, and starting from what's the great difference, the biggest difference that makes a big difference is what puts me in crisis. Maybe I'm in greater crisis because it's leading me to a greater opportunity.
Usava questi due termini, occasione o tentazione.
So is it an opportunity or a temptation? Ignatius said, is it an opportunity to grow, or is it a temptation to say, no, we'll never get there at all, we'll never go anywhere?
Penso che per ancora le domande ho finito.
Thank you. I think we don't have any questions anymore.
Possiamo concludere.
So we can conclude. Thanks to all of you.
Quindi l'integrazione di tutto quello
So health means the integration of all we are, the commitment not to set aside the other components of human person in the development of our identity, to orient our choices towards those that lead us from good to better, experiencing consolation, trust, hope, and the ability to love. So heartfelt thanks to Susie and Narcisio, the technical team, the Care to Imagine team, and all of you have built this moment of encounter, dialogue, and sharing with us. The next webinars we have planned will focus on the importance of our inner life in relationships with others and with nature, because everything on our planet is interconnected. We count on you. You can follow the social page of our United World Project. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Chao, gracias.